Good evening. Um, there is an idea that I've been mulling over the past month or so, and I've been wondering what to call this intersection of ideas, right? And I thought of calling it the theosocial whole, right? Borrowing from Milbank, the idea of theopolitics, right? And noticing that there is a overlap between theopolitics and social theory, right? There's this overlap between the humanities and the sciences and the arts, right? And when you consider and you put all these things together, it's as if we are attempting to understand the slice of reality that we experience, right? So I'm thinking the theosocial whole is the slice of reality we experience, right? The world we live in, the aspects of reality of the world that we have access to. And so in thinking about it, right, it means that that you are trying to see the overlap between theology, psychology, sociology, philosophy, art, science, right? And you're taking them in attempts to understand the family, to study, to understand religion, law, culture, politics, and economics, right? And just how much of it seems to be connected to reactionary thought of the reactionary frame, right? I think there's a lack of awareness amongst in the discourse, in practice, that all is connected. We pay homage or lip service to that idea, but it's like it never really quite sunk in, right? For instance, why is it that we observe in liberal democracies the failures of separation of powers? There's the de jure versus the de facto expression of power within these societies, right? So we do agree that the economy, the religion, the community, the family, and the self are connected and affect each other in certain ways, right? But then we also are aware that they're all so complex, they're too complex to be modeled, right? Like trying to understand it and the way the entire theosocial whole works, it feels impossible due to the scope and the level of detail within each scope and the subdivisions within each scope, right? And so when you're trying to model it and understand it as a whole, it becomes really difficult. You have to ignore many details, right? But at the same time, if you zero in too much, it will be too simple an approach to understand, right? It's like a bad form of bivariate analysis, right? Let's say there are like 15 interconnected factors and you're trying to understand just the relation of 2, but then it's an interconnection of 15. So you'd end up with a partial view rather than an accurate view, right? Yeah, so it's just that point that the interconnections and the areas of overlaps are such that changes in one, right, causes changes in the others. And at times it might even be difficult to predict the outcome that will follow. There are certain things that you could predict that you can point to, but there are others that fall as an extension that we are not able to see very clearly, right? And so essentially the theosocial whole is like trying to combine academic agent summary of politics, Milbank's understanding of theology and social theory, and you take Patrick Deneen's account of the failures of liberalism, right? And you're looking to tie them together. So like, why did liberalism fail, or why is liberalism failing, or why doesn't it produce the outcomes that the adherents or the advocates of the perspectives are looking to bring about? It's because of the nature of the theosocial whole, right? And just so in summary, like as Paul, it was in Academic Agents in his video when he was just outlining his thoughts of what he will discuss on the millennial, right? He pointed out that politics isn't separate from law. Because basically it's a summary of Carl Schmitt, right? It's the basic idea that you eventually find out that Parliament is a show. The agreements and the alliances are made outside the halls of Parliament. There's no room to convince each other, right? Yeah, so it's basically the crisis of parliamentary democracy. Right? Politics is separate from the economy, right? And you got this from de Juvenal, right? This whole idea that the public-private distinction is a show. Public concern is frequently private interest that is disguised as public concern. And you can also find the same idea in C.A. Bond's Nemesis, which is like digesting of or taking an element of de Juvenal, right? And he zeroes in on an aspect of de Juvenal in Nemesis. That's why C.A. Bond, right? And politics isn't separate from society, and that is a summary of Mosca, Pareto, and Michel's, the elite theorists, that there's always a ruling class, right? And you can even capture the idea that culture is downstream from law, right? Or another way you can say that culture is downstream of politics. Well, if we talk about the overlap between politics and law, particularly in the so-called democracy or democracies, right, and seeing how things flow from it, then more controversially, I would say politics is separate from religion, right? Well, I could be accused of making a teenage connection to Milbank, right? But I was thinking this on account of Master's theopolitical exploration of Milbank's work, right? Like when you consider the overlaps between geopolitics and religion, and the means by which the current political formula was refined from the previous political formula, and this type of secular theology that is inherent within liberal ideas and ideals, right? So you have a type of civic religion that does not realize it's a civic religion or denies that it's a religion, right? It's an atheistic religion that would posit all religions as theistic, right? And tend to miss the connection between religion and ultimate concern, right? And they see it as purely as an element of conviction rather than also the social element of religion, because you cannot have a religion without the personal conviction of the adherents, but you can also not have a religion without the social and the community element of it all, and you also can't have religion without the view and the understanding of the supernatural and how the people and the individual have to connect themselves in aligning with the supernatural, right? And so you find a lot of overlap between religion and the political formula that is presented to us, right? So this overlap between theology and social theory kind of help us see that politics is separate from religion. And thereby, when we put all this together, we see that there is a certain theo-social whole, right? That there is the idea of God, or rather, let me say, ultimate reality, and the relationship of the society with ultimate reality, the natural environment, and the individual, right? So you as an element distinct within this environment that takes both a material dimension and an immaterial dimension, right? And you also as an aspect of it or in connection to it, right? And navigating it, right? So this is what I think is the theo-social whole. And it's, I think, the basis by which reactionaries and conservatives can come into agreement that when you mess with forces that you cannot model accurately, right? You can only model aspects or elements within it, but you can never really predict the whole, right? There's some predictions that are easier to make, some that are more expansive because of the relation between the elements are fewer. So for example, if I change the speed of light, that only affects the natural world, but what is the effect of brainwashing baby Hitler, right? So when it comes to dealing with agents, when it comes to dealing with will, when it comes to dealing with groups of people, right? Acts of agency, acts of will, it makes modeling much harder because of agency within the autonomous agents, right? And not only the element of autonomy within certain agents in nature, there is also this element of rational agency, right? And moral agency and aesthetic agency, right? And so the human being and the human being's interaction with the world, the people around him, the past, the present, the future, and ultimate concern is a description of this social whole that we are trying to understand and make sense of. And so that is what I'm attempting to understand currently, right? And I will be attempting to go through the elements, and then after going through the elements, try to present an account of the whole, and thereby hopefully make a definitive case as to why in this current theosocial state the moral course of action or the rational position to take or the aesthetically appropriate position to take would be some form of reactionary thought, right? And so it's a really long way of going about to understand and say that being conservative wouldn't be enough, being liberal wouldn't be enough, because that which is lost, that which is broken, is something really precious and important within the theosocial whole.